Prologue. Korraban. 31 years after the Battle of Yavin. Night settled. As the sun slowly died in bleeding colors behind the horizon, the ever-present darkness soon rose from its haunting rest to play visage upon the ruins in the valley below. Ancient were these ruins, with towering spires crumbling in fortification, yet dreadfully prideful in its foreboding history. Through these signatures of a once great empire stood a single, monolithic pyramid. Its stature was imposing, providing a great and terrible atmosphere of oppression in the beating hearts of all those who had the misfortune to stare at its majesty. Yet, this was not the feeling and the calm of a dozen black-robed men striding through the remains of their birthright. Fearlessly, they entered the great courtyard, their heavy strides echoing off the aged stone. Their leader stopped for a moment to take in everything. There was a feeling deep within him he did not quite understand. He searched within his mind, and yet could not describe this feeling. Was it fear? Was it amazement? No, it was stronger than fear, deeper than just simple amazement. It was destiny. His destiny. Through the unlikely and treacherous paths that he had taken over the many long years, he was here, and he would fulfill it, one way or another.
My lord!
One of his followers beckoned with a raised hand. He simply nodded, staring up at the capstone of the temple. Let's continue. A dozen paces ahead lay the great door, cast of stone and steel. From the looks of it, it weighed several tons. Any archaeological team observing the site would have required great machines to move it even inches. A great, if not impossible, task for ordinary men. Well, we're not ordinary men, are we? He then spread his arms wide in either direction, and like an orchestra following to the command of a seasoned director, the others quickly flanked him. They gestured their hands to the great mass ahead, bowing their heads and closing their eyes. Then they started to chant.
This is a lie. There is only passion.
Their hands shook with the effort, their bodies began to quake like posts in a gale.
Through passion I gained strength.
The sound of rumbling echoed through the valley as the ground itself thundered with intense power.
Through strength I gained power.
The stone began to wobble from its perch, but its stubbornness was telling. It was as if the ancients themselves were testing them, trying their strength and commitment to see if they were worthy of their secrets. The secrets of absolute power.
Through power I gained victory.
The robed figures, however, were up to the challenge. With their combined might, the door began to scrape across the stone foundations with incredible, yet futile protest.
Through victory, my chains are broken.
Their leader suddenly strode out ahead of them, taking the stone gate in both hands. With a roar, he pulled at the mast and wrenched it clear of its supports. With an explosion of stone and metal that produced a great fog of dust and sand, the mast hovered high above them, steadied there by trembling hands.
The Force.
He rasped as he held the mass above him with all the effort he could muster, sweat pouring down his temple in droves.
Shall free me.
With this, he let the stone fall. With a thunderous crack, it splintered into pieces upon the ancient floor in a terrible heap. He at last let out a sigh. He had never felt this fatigued, this wearied than in this very moment. The sun was to come, he mused softly.
Indeed it is, my child.
He stiffened. Though he knew the truth of the matter, he could not help but whirl his eyes around, looking for the speaker.
You have come far, farther than many.
Thank you, my lord.
The courtyard that you now stand upon has been visited by the bones of many a fool who thought they could wield the power that you and your fellows now seek.
I will not fail you, my lord. It is my destiny.
Indeed it is.
The voice betrayed a sense of acknowledgement that brought pride to him, but he quickly fought back his growing anticipation. This had been a moment he had worked towards for years. He could afford to be patient if but for a few more minutes.
Come then, my child. Come and claim the power that you seek.
Yes, my lord. With this, he signaled the rest of his followers. They began their descent into the underworld. Deeper and deeper they went, through many a hall and shrine, through where once stood the great lords of the Sith, now resting within their tombs. The writing of their forebears marked the walls with illuminating crimson, telling the many tales of their great conquests and discoveries. He felt his anticipation rise again within his chest. His heart felt as though it was going to burst from his ribcage. He steadied himself. Soon, he thought to himself. Soon. Then they came upon another stone gate, blocking their passage. Power is only means to an end, the ancient writing declared upon its stone. Not the end itself. Okay, then what is the end? He thought to himself as he studied the writing more. Then, he understood. Power is the key to which I unlock my destiny. He then gestured his hand at the door, and at his beckoning began its ascension. With a groan and exhaustive dust, the door rose to the ceiling and locked into place.
Very good. Very good, my young apprentice.
He stiffened at the word. He would reply, but thought better of it. Instead, he gestured once more to his followers and marched through the hallway. Moments later, a bright illumination cast its blinding gaze upon him. When he cleared them away, he was greeted by a grand hall cast in deep golds, blacks, and reds. The stone, the metalwork, it looked new, preserved. It was of the finest craftsmanship, great pillars of gold and silver lining the walkways of the room, bright flames cast high above in hanging chandeliers. Within the center of the chamber lay an arena of sand, dull and dried reds marking them ever so slightly, and above that were steps ascending to a great throne, and upon it, he grimaced. It was merely a hologram, once again.
You are disappointed, my apprentice.
The hologram asked, his voice like a strained whisper that somehow cast an indomitable power.
Oh yes,
the young man answered, the tone of his voice sharp but withheld as he gazed upon the towering figure.
I am. I expected you to be here, in the flesh.
I, however, promise no such thing.
The young man narrowed his eyes.
I have done all that you've asked, and yet you still don't trust me enough to meet me in person.
Yes.
The figure nodded knowingly.
But there is a reason that I do this.
He rose from his chair, the shivering blue dancing in firelight as he descended the steps. His true height became quickly apparent, towering a head's length above all those below him, and in a blink, he was before him. The young man stared up at the figure, masked in robes of velvet darker than pitch, and yet the face itself was an even darker mask, like peering at the starless night. The figure stared back, the air becoming frigid like an arctic world. The light seemed to dim, and an oppressive feeling lurched out that struck at the young man's heart, squeezing it. He clutched his chest, falling to his knees, but his eyes did not move. He would not back down.
You prove my point.
The young man's heart was released. He allowed himself to strain for breath as the imposing figure walked past him, his hands clasped behind his back.
There was another like you, strong, impulsive, fearless. He became my rival, a challenger to my beliefs, and an upholder to the ancient ways.
He then whirled on the spot, facing him deftly.
It was he who nearly saw the end of our order.
Palpatine.
The young man spat out, struggling to catch his breath, his heart proving an utter hindrance.
Yes.
Even through the hologram, he could feel the man's smile.
You know well of him, don't you, boy?
He whirled on the spot again, gesturing to him with a friendly hand.
Tell me, what was it that caused his downfall? Do you know?
The younger of the two straightened himself, attempting to regain some of his composure. He thought for a moment.
You underestimated the loyalty of his apprentice. The love he had for his son.
The man in the dark velvet robes merely shook his head.
No, my child, that was merely a result. Sidious's fall began long before that moment. It began with a fatal flaw. Shall I tell you? It is the least that I can do.
He took his silence as an answer.
It was his lack of vision, his lack of purpose.
The younger man stared at him in astonishment.
But he created an empire,
He retorted.
Yes, he did. And what did he do with it?
He forced peace upon the galaxy. He established order where there was chaos.
He laughed.
Peace, you say? Order? Yes, perhaps for a short while. But within the first years of his empire, impressive as it may be with its force of arms and infrastructure, one could see it inherited its ruler's own hubris.
Hubris? What do you mean hubris?
His abstract, unrestrained cruelty.
But the way of the Sith is strength.
Strength without purpose or reason? That, my child, is not strength, it is stupidity.
The younger man gave him a look of interest. Confusion, yes, but interest.
Good.
He thought to himself with a smile.
He wishes to learn, then I shall teach him. Tell me, my child, did Master Skywalker open his doors to all in the galaxy, regardless of status or birth?
The younger man nodded.
Can you tell me why he did that?
The younger man nodded, straightening even further at the mention of the name. His answer was immediate, and without hesitation. There was pride in his voice.
Master Skywalker, he believed in people. He believed in what they could do.
Yes,
He answered with a smile.
he saw their potential. He saw their spirit. Yes, your uncle was truly a wise man, one who learned to understand his past.
He then turned to the arena, contemplating softly.
This was my student's greatest failure.
He slaughtered countless people without purpose.
He nodded slowly.
There is a benefit to being an observer. The rebellion that rose and vanquished him, he was their unwitting originator. He needed to sate his bloodlust, to control trillions of lives and craft worlds in his image, only earned him the enmity of his subjects. He created his enemy. This is not the way of the Sith, and because of his arrogance, we were nearly extinguished.
If that is the case, then why didn't we ally with Master Skywalker and his order?
The younger man drew closer to him, standing beside him in the arena of sand and blood.
Why? Why did you ask me to—
Because of whom he would have protected.
He answered rather somberly.
You've seen it, my child. This new republic. It isn't truly new, is it?
The younger man stared at the sand in silence, and that silence was telling.
There was a saying, the sins of the father shall be carried by the sins of the son. For as much as the rebellion attempted to avert the damage done by its predecessors, it was inevitable for them to fall into the same trap. Such a waste.
He sighed, his somber attitude once more surprising him. He shifted the sands before them, almost drawing with them.
I respected your uncle for what he accomplished,
He said at length.
Rebuilding the order for nothing, breaking their stagnation, seeking knowledge in the pursuit of the Force. It is my greatest regret for what had to be done. But
He turned, placing his holographic hand on the man's shoulder.
you know as well as I do that he would have stood in our way, that he would never have accepted our vision, nor understand what the galaxy needs, that for as much as he disagreed with the New Republic, he would have answered their call. For this, he had to be swept aside for now.
The younger man's head drooped, his eyes sealing shut. His heart weighed heavily in sorrow as he replayed the events that shaped him, and what he knew he must do. Yet the screams, the accusing eyes glaring back at him, haunted him. He felt a hand at his chin, gesturing fatherly, and bringing his eyes back to the faceless, voidless being before him.
I did, however, what none before you could, my child. I can feel your sorrow, your hatred, and I understand them all too well, but you also know what we must do. Tell me, my apprentice, tell me, what is your destiny?
To save the galaxy.
He answered stoically, his face hard and proud, his eyes full of meaning and power.
Indeed.
He nodded with approval, then his head drooped in a sense of utter foreboding that chilled the air to the bone.
But first, there is one final test for you.
Oh, I'm ready.
We shall see.
Upon uttering these words, the 11 other individuals suddenly encircled the pair of them. Shoulder to shoulder, they blocked all escape save for the throne. But it would be pointless to retreat there.
Bring him in.
The shutter of a door opened. 2 hulking individuals dressed in ornate scarlet and gold cloaks marched in, each dragging a battered and broken man. He whimpered through the bag over his head as the servants dropped him in a scattered heap at the feet of the Dark Warriors.
What is this?
Loyalty.
The man in black answered. The bag was plucked from his head, revealing a bruised and swelled-up face, purple and black in its severity. The face was unrecognizable, but the brown and gray robes he wore were unmistakable. The uniform of a Jedi.
This is unnecessary.
He protested, facing the unfazed look of his master.
You don't need to kill him.
He is our enemy. He is your enemy. And my child, you have long since made your choice.
Suddenly, the cloaked figures rose to fighting stances. Their overcloaks fell to the floor, revealing men and women, human and alien, adorned in individualized black armor and robes. Yet what was most distinct were their masks. Each trimmed in dark armored plating, had silver metal face shields, each designed to their own specific fashion. Yet they each gave off the impression of wolves, hungry and utterly vicious to the thrill of the hunt. Their hollow eyes glared at him, their hands swiftly going to their dominant sides. There laid the trophies of their many, many kills, and quite a few were the hilts of lightsabers. Then in a flash, 11 crimson sabers blared in their hateful fire, filling the room with a thick scarlet overture. He could only stare at his would-be executioners, knowing what would come if he refused.
And your choice cannot be easily undone.
His master broke through his thoughts with the slightest of whispers. He stared down at the fallen Jedi, his eyes meeting the desperate, silently pleading face with measured guilt and knowledge in what he must do.
Fulfill your destiny, my child. Fulfill your grandfather's legacy.
He stared down once more at the Jedi before him. Then he drew his weapon. A ravenous, flame-like blade sprouted forth from its middle with an animalistic growl. Then 2 more blades sprung from the sides of the emitter, bearing much in the way of appearance to that of ancient swords. The crossguard was an ancient design, found among the first to harness the power of the lightsaber. Its fiery color drew a red shadow over the Jedi's face, sealing in that moment his fate. Then, like an executioner's axe, the blade descended in the blink of an eye and the body fell to the floor, cold as the stone on which it lay. The student let out a restrained breath. He felt as though he were in a nightmare. Then he felt the cold, sizzling hand taken by the shoulder, speaking softly, almost fatherly.
Well done, my child. Well done.
Then the knights standing before them raised their sabers in a salute. The master gestured with a hand, and the student fell to his knees. He felt the simmering hands upon the sides of his face, and then he heard the roar of a lightsaber, glimmering softly in the hologram beside his head. Then he noticed the others, lowering their sabers in his honor.
By the will of the ancients, by the strength of darkness, by the right of the Sith, dub thee I do, Kylo Ren.
Suddenly a mask like no other appeared before him, hovering above his head, black in form, steel in trim, its faceplate like a shadowed mandible.
Rise, Lord of the Knights of Ren, rise and take your birthright.
And so, he clutched the helm in both hands, rising to his feet. He stared into the visor and found a different man staring back at him. The man he knew he must become. And in that moment, he donned the helmet with a loud hiss and became that which he must be.
What is thy bidding, my master?